Hello and welcome back to part 7 of this tutorial series. In this part I will show you how to make your map more interactive in terms of single player events, scripted events and stuff like that. So I got my basic room with my player start, and usually you spawn with additional equipment like your pistol, your sniper, and your anti-armor. To add it to your inventory on startup, open up the properties of the player start, and under the player start category you can click on this plus icon for start inventory, click add, and then you can specify the equipment you want to start with. So in this case it's CT inventory dot DC17M sniper for the sniper, and there's also CT inventory inventory dot DC17M anti-armor, and CT inventory dot DC15S for the pistol. You can also add any other weapon as long as it's like a valid weapon. You can find those in the inventory section. You just have to untick those two checkboxes and then go to actor and inventory and a weapon, and you can see all available weapons to choose. Although some might be restricted to certain pawns, like the staff, the Genosin staff or whatever, or turrets and shit. So anyway, you can also add grenades and shit. So this is how you add the default equipment on player start when you load up the map. Okay, so scripted events and other stuff to make it more interactive. The basics for now. Back to our player start. In the events category, we can specify an event name to trigger. In this case, let's just call it start. So when the level loads up and you spawn, an event with the event called start will trigger. An event with the name start will trigger. The next thing we need is a scriptable trigger. This can be found in the actor AI script, scripted sequences, and then scripted trigger. So just place it on the map. Usually, I recommend doing or grouping them together, because it will be a mess when you have 100, hundreds of triggers and scripted sequences or scripted triggers, and they are all over the map. So just recommend grouping them together, the trigger and the scripted trigger. So opening up the properties, you will see an AI script category and then actions. Click on the plus icon and then the add button. And the first thing you want to add is an action called wait for event on the bottom of the list. As the name implies, the action waits for an event with a certain name to trigger, and then continues with the chain of actions. In this case, the external event is called start. And so when the player spawns and the player start triggers the event name start, the scripted action or the scripted trigger will proceed with the actions. And by clicking on the add button, you can add all the required action you want to in your level, and they will execute in the chain. For example, some of them are self-explanatory. For example, display message, click on new, will display a message on the top of your HUD. So just write whatever you want to, level start, the duration in seconds, and then like an optional color if you want, like in a different color. And yeah, and as previously said, you can just chain all those actions, and this scripted trigger will execute them in order. There's also like I don't know, play music or play sound, and like you just select your sound you want to play. For example, this Battle Droid sound, then click on the use button and it will reference the Battle Droid sound effect. There are like also other parameters like wait for finish, which halts the execution of the chain until the sound effects finish playing, and then the next action will execute. But I don't want to add any more like actions behind the play sound. So this is like how you can like do certain interactive map design or map elements. So yeah, this will be triggered on player start when the player spawns. And the next one, as previously explained with the elevator or the like the moving static mesh, you can also trigger stuff with the triggers. In this case, let's just place a trigger here. Again, adjust the collision. Like typically you would like to have a big collision radius to cover the whole hallway, so the player like can't just go around and not trigger it. But for now, I just keep it that way for demonstration. So in the moving or in the like elevator tutorial, I changed the trigger type to TT use. So the trigger only gets triggered when the player hits the F key or the use key. By default, it's set to player proximity, which means that whenever the player walks into this radius, it will trigger no matter what. You can also change the trigger type to other things like pawn proximity, which triggers whenever like any other pawn, like a droid or a clone trooper or whatever, like walks in. There's also class proximity to restrict to a certain class. Any proximity, not sure. Guessing from the name, it just like triggers from anything. Shooters when like a projectile hits the radius. Human player proximity and squad member proximity. I guess that's self-explanatory. So we just keep it to player proximity. And yeah, by default, the B trigger once only is set to true. For the most cases, you want to keep it to true. So the chain of actions you're triggering only trigger once, and not like you walk outside the radius and back in and it triggers again. Unless you suddenly want to, then you have to set this to false. And finally, you have to specify the like the name you want to, like the event name to trigger. Just in case, I just call it trigger 1. So whenever a player walks into this radius, an event with the name trigger 1 like will trigger. So now we need another scripted trigger. And again, the first action is wait for event. In this case, trigger 1. And now we can, do stuff. For example, we could do a fail mission. So the level ends, you have to retrade the level in case you want to, or set something blocked, or set a collision, or hide it, or whatever. For the most part, those actions are self-explaining. You can also chain events together. For example, you have a long list of actions you want to execute, and after a while you want to trigger another scripted trigger. You can do that by using trigger event and then the new event name you want to trigger. So yeah, for example, you can do console command, and then the console command you want to, for example, set pawn jump C, and then 1000 to make the player jump high, and then you can add another trigger, and so on. So you can chain them together. Trigger 2. Obviously, you would give them proper names so you don't get confused, because one or more triggers can execute the same event, or one trigger can also execute one event name, but two scripted triggers can have the same event name. For example, this one got trigger 1 as wait for event. I could create another scripted trigger with the same wait for event, but a different chain of actions to execute. So you don't have to have a really long chain of actions. You can do them simultaneously if you want to. So this gets trigger 2. Let's do a simple pawn factory. Pawn factories are essentially like spawn pawns for enemies or pawns in general, whether it's like droids or clones or whatever. So we go to factory, and then pawn factory. This is how it looks like. Rotate it around to face the player. I'll open up the properties, and on the events category, the tag, we will just write trigger 2. So when the event trigger 2 gets triggered, the factory will start spawning, like droids, for example. In the factory category, there are some things to set up. The first thing is prototype, the pawn you want to spawn. In this case, I just select the battle droid. The spawn interval in seconds, 1 by default, it's fine. The spawn mode should always be from factory, so it spawns at the factory. You can also change it to random or new player or cyclic, but I'm not sure how good this works or how beneficial it is. And start state from factory can also be anything else. Shutdown for the droids, so they sleep, or shutdown, like they stay shut down, and asleep for the Trendos or any human pawns, and so on. But by default, the idle one is sufficient enough. The capacity defines how many pawns will spawn. So in case, just set it to 10. The max alive variable tells how many pawns from this factory can be in the level before stopping the spawner. For example, if I set him to 5, the factory will spawn 5 droids, and then stop because only 5 can be alive, and whenever I kill one droid, another one will spawn until the capacity limit is reached. Max and world, I guess it's the same thing. Not sure about it. Just set it to 5 as well. So yeah, there's also a scripted like an action to stop spawning from the factory. So for example, if you want unlimited droids, you would just set it to a very high number, like 9,000 or whatever. And so for now, so the droids. So whenever we walk into this trigger, the factory will start spawning droids. However, they won't move. What you have to do is add path nodes for the AI to follow a path and then, more or less free roam around. So I just want to add some path nodes, those apples, and not too far away from each other, but in close proximity. So how to connect them? So you select the first path node on this route, and on the patrol route from factory, you click on add, and under the node click on the use button. It will choose the first path node you created. Important that you set the run to node variable to true, as well as the shoot while moving. So the first one is that the droid actually moves to this path node, and the second one is the droid can shoot while he's running to the path node. And yeah, we do this same thing with the second one. So click on add and then add a new node, click on use and set those two variables to true. And the next one, click on use and those two variables. And the final one. Oops. There we go. Use and true. So if we click on the pawn factory, you will see a red line indicating the path or the route the droid or the pawns will take. And what you can do is patrol mode from factory. This is set to loop, so the droid runs up to the last node here, and then runs back again until reaching the factory again, and then looping around, running back and forth. I don't want to have that, so I just change it to PM once. So it just runs up until here and then just stops. You can also change it like to random. So for example, the first droid runs to the first, the second to the second, the third to the third, and so on. Or you can just do ping pong. So they just run to the first and run back, and then run to the second and run back, and so on. But like for the most part, it's just PM once. And finally, the patrol priority from factory, you have to change this to 1. So the droid will run to this path no matter what. Like sometimes if you, by default, if you set to 0.3, there can be like there's a chance that the patrol will just stop moving and just stay in place. So we'll just force it by setting it to 1. Okay, so just to recap. So when we hit this trigger, this scripted trigger gets executed. A console command gets executed, and then an event called trigger2 gets triggered, which is referenced by this pawn factory, and the pawn factory will start spawning battle droids. Now, we can also have a FX factory. An FX factory is, as the name implies, a factory for effects, basically. So you can like spawn explosions or anything else. And again, we can just do trigger 2 to reference it. And in the factory you can, change all those settings. In the prototype this time, instead of selecting pawns, you can select the effect. In case you don't, or you're not sure about which effect is which one, you can just look it up in the particle systems. So let's, for example, explosion. What is it? Explosion trap metal. So scroll down, explosion trap metal, and in this case you should change the capacity to 1, otherwise like by default it's set to 2, so 2 explosion will spawn, which is kind of useless unless you want to. And everything else, okay, you can like obviously change the draw scale, either like in general or on one of the 3 axes, and like anything else is not relevant for effects. So yeah. Finally, what I want to do is have another trigger here at the end. Add trigger here. Change the collision radius, I mean. So when the player runs past the battle droids and hits this trigger, I would just call it end. I'm gonna add a new scripted trigger. Scripted actions, wait for event, oops, and add. And there's like a useful action called stop factory spawning. And in this case, we just select the tag of the factory, in this case trigger 2, the factory tag, and it will stop spawning the infinite battle droids. And that way, you can, control the spawning and whatsoever. There's also this variable setting, like permanently disable factory, in case you never want to trigger it again. You could obviously like re-trigger the factory again with another scripted trigger. But yeah, that's like how you do this stuff. Yeah, so for the most part, those actions are self-explaining. Add ammo, attached to gunship and turrets. Those are like these are being used by the briefing levels to attach you to the gunship moving or whatsoever. And yeah, once you have like some general knowledge on how to do stuff, it's like pretty easy to get used to. And if you're not sure or certain on how exactly to do one thing, you can always like open up the existing levels and look those scripted sequences up yourself. So So it's one last thing to note is if you want to somewhat move or let the AI move around without a specified patrol route, you would have to add path nodes to your levels. Those path nodes like benefit all AI, not only the droids, but also your squad mates. So in case you're wondering why they are being stuck in place on where you place them or where you spawn them, this is because like there are no path nodes to um, go. So just place them around a little bit, build all, and if you right click on the 3D viewport top bar and then go to view and then path, you can see where the AI will like automatically go. So this is kind of useful to debug it is if like pawns get stuck somewhere and you want to know why they don't move around or like follow you and shit. And yeah. So build all, then save, and then let's test in game. Now 1 second, I have to enable my HUD. So as you can see, I spawn and the level start text appears on my HUD. And if I move up, battlegrounds will spawn. And as you can see, only like 5 spawn and they move around. And as soon as I kill some, they respawn. And I also can, jump high, of course. I set the console variable. And whenever I, go back, I triggered the, the trigger I placed at the end, and that caused the factory to stop spawning those droids. So yeah, this is like how you do a sort of basic scripted events. Although this is just like some fundamental basic. There's like a lot more to it than just those actions I just showed. So in the next parts I will go much deeper. So see ya.